going to talk about reduce, the JavaScript array method that you'll often hear talked about alongside of map and filter. As a matter of fact, if you are watching this video, it could be because you've been using map and filter with success and you want to learn how to use reduce. But reduce seems a little more complicated because the callback function here takes two arguments, which makes you think that reduce is working on two items at a time, and map and filter are only working on one item at a time. And that's exactly what used to confuse me about reduce until I understood that reduce really is just working on one item at a time, and that one item is the current value. Before we go any further though, let's just see that reduce works, and then we'll talk about how it works. Down here in the terminal, I'll just run the file, and you can see that we get the result of 9. So how did that work? Well, let's talk about the anatomy of reduce and why it's called reduce in the first place. Reduce is an array method that takes, it gets called on an array, it needs an array, and it reduces an array down to a single value. That's why it's called reduce. The end result of reduce will always be a single value. Now, more advanced usages of reduce, you will find out that that single value can be a single array, it can be a single object, but in this case, it's just a single number, an integer. Reduce is always trying to take your array and get it down to a single value, and it does that based on the instructions you give it in the callback function. Reduce takes a couple arguments. It takes a callback function, and it takes an initial value. Because I have set my initial value to be 3, and because my callback function is essentially a set of instructions telling reduce to add all the values in the array together, we get the result of 9. Let's look more closely at the callback function itself. It takes two arguments, accumulator and current value. Now it's important to note that these names here mean nothing to the computer. I could name this A and this B, and as long as this was A and this was B, the function would work perfectly. But to make the code human readable and to show that this variable here is actually standing for some kind of functionality, developers try to name their variables in a meaningful way. But to the computer, it doesn't make any difference. When you use reduce on an array, and you've given reduce this second argument of an initial value, the accumulator gets set to 3 on the first pass. So let's walk through the iterations of reduce on this small array and see how it works. On the first pass through the array, the initial value being set to 3, the accumulator is also then 3. The current value is 1. So 3 plus 1 equals 4. On the second pass through the array, the accumulator, it has accumulated, it's keeping track of what's happening over here. The accumulator is now equal to 4, so 4 is the value of the accumulator on the second pass. So over here, we're saying add the accumulator to the current value, so it's 4 plus 2, which equals 6. On the third pass through, the accumulator now equals 6. So the instructions are saying add 6 to the current value, which is 3. 6 plus 3 equals 9. Reduce has some flexibility though. This second argument is not required. If you choose to leave this second argument out, reduce knows how to adjust. Without an initial value set, accumulator on the first pass through is equal to the item at the first index of the array. So in this case, 1. So the first pass through the array, it's 1 plus 2 equals 3. Because reduce has dealt with the first two values on the first pass through, the second pass through, the current value is equal to 3. And the accumulator is equal to 3. So 3 plus 3 is 6. So what I've shown you is the textbook example of reduce. This is the most basic example, summing up all the values in an array. I hope to make a couple more videos to show you how powerful reduce can be. There's an infinite number of things you can do with reduce depending on what you do with this callback function here. If this video was helpful, please like it and I'll see you next time.